Hi, I'm Femi Oke, and you're in the stream. Today, US senators are debating gun control after a deadly attack on a gay nightclub. The incident brought new allies into the fight for reform, but will it make a difference this time? That is a question that our digital producer Malika Bilal has been checking out, and you found what?
The answer online from most people who follow us is kind of a resounding no. There's a lot of pessimism there.
Right.
In specific, on the Senate, as you mentioned, there are 4 gun control measures up for debate today, Monday. So we asked our community what they think of that. This is one tweet we got from someone. She's the only person with a little bit of optimism. Susie says, I think that Chris Murphy's bill, he's a senator out of Connecticut, to require background checks for all gun sales could be the most effective. So we will see, but we want your take on this as well. You can tweet us with #AJStream.
Well, Pulse, it's the sound of a heartbeat, of course, and also the name of the nightclub where members and friends of the LGBTQ community went to dance and celebrate Gay Pride just last week. It's also where a gunman used a semi-automatic rifle to murder 49 people before he was killed by police. That was America's deadliest shooting in a century. Here's US President Obama right after that attack.
Foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando, especially our friends who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. I visited with the families of many of the victims on Thursday, and one thing I told them is that they're not alone. The American people and people all over the world are standing with them.
His words are eerily familiar. Have a listen to this.
Early on Friday, at least 12 people were killed when a gunman opened fire at a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. We learned that more than 24 people were killed when a gunman opened fire in an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut. There's been another mass shooting in America, this time in a community college in Oregon. We don't have all the facts, but we do know that, once again, innocent people were killed in part because someone who wanted to inflict harm had no trouble getting their hands on a gun.
President Obama has responded to more than a dozen mass shootings since taking office 8 years ago. And after each incident, the calls for gun reform surged, but soon fall silent as supporters of the National Rifle Association, or NRA, stand firm to their constitutional right to bear arms. Now, LGBT activists are joining the gun reform movement, and the American Medical Association and unlikely politicians are calling for an end to what they say is an epidemic. With us to discuss this, we have James Krellerstein. He is a member of ACT UP New York, and that's an HIV prevention group. In Phoenix, Arizona, Jerry Hills is the founder of Arizonans for Gun Safety. In Corpus Christi, Texas, Richard Feldman is CEO of the Independent Firearm Owners Association, formerly with the National Rifle Association. And in South Hadley, Massachusetts, Richard Moran is Professor of Sociology at Mount Holyoke College. We also invited the NRA to join the conversation, but they turned us down. Guess for starters, we are going to be talking about gun control. It is a big debate in the US. I think it's important to know who actually has a gun, who carries a gun in this conversation. Professor, do you have a gun?
No, I don't.
All right. Richard.
Well, I think it's fair to assume that I have more than a few,
All right.
and I do sometimes carry.
All right. Are you carrying right now?
No.
Geraldine, do you have a gun?
I don't have a gun, but I do have a concealed carry permit in the state of Arizona.
And James?
I do not.
All right. Okay, just so people know where you're coming from. This might be important information. Richard, how would you describe the reaction that many Americans have immediately after a mass shooting, one that actually gets publicized, one that gets on the news and is rolling breaking news coverage? How would you describe that reaction?
There's always the horror of the tragedy, and we seem as Americans to constantly focus on the wrong issue. We focus on the gun instead of in whose hands were the guns. There are over 100 million Americans that own guns. There's a very, very small number of people that misuse them. If we focus on those who misuse guns, we could do something about the problem.
Professor, what were you going to say?
I don't think that analysis is very helpful to us. We have a culture of gun violence in America, and it's a very difficult thing to deal with. I don't think the laws themselves are going to do the trick, although I think the more laws we can pass against, especially against assault weapons, the better off we will be. However, we have to change the norms, values, behaviors of a large sector of the American population. And that is going to take time, but it can be done. The Mothers Against Drunk Driving accomplished it in about a 10 or 15-year period, where the whole country now is cracking down on drunk driving and the carnage that causes on the road. So it can be done, but it's a long process, and you have to appeal to the American values that we all hold dearly. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get very far. The trouble is
Yeah, go ahead, James.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think it's wrong-headed to just focus on this as a regulatory or legal issue. Inherently, there's a cultural issue that needs to be addressed as well. But before we can really even begin to discuss sort of the policy changes on both the sort of legal side and on the cultural side, we need to really understand what's going on in gun violence today in America. There are 33,000 gun deaths in the United States of America, yet we have almost no adequate surveillance of what's going on, right? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are actually prohibited from doing any research on gun violence in America. That's more than twice the number of people who die from HIV, right? And to have absolutely no surveillance about what's going on here means that to actually make the proper policy changes, both on the cultural and on the regulatory side, is incredibly difficult to do.
James, let me just add before. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think we really need. I think we really need to define what gun violence means right here. Mr. Feldman said that just a small percentage of people misuse guns. The reality is about 100,000 people a year are shot, and that breaks down to 272 people a day. Of that, approximately 90 die, and the rest survive their injuries, usually life-changing. So even since we've been talking about the latest mass shooting in Orlando, you know, the numbers are that another 2,176 people have been shot just since then. This is a public health epidemic. We need to treat it like one, we need to research it and track it like one, and we need to make policies that are not based on paranoia and fear, but on actual hard data.
And Jerry, I hear what you're saying, but I want to share with all of you a comment we got on Facebook from someone named Robert. And it kind of picks up on what the professor was saying about needing to change a sector of society. This is Robert who says the NRA represents their people better than the government does. They are nothing without their members. So Richard Feldman, I want to go to you with this, because basically what he's saying is the power is in the hands of the people, and these are the people behind the NRA.
Well, he's exactly correct. The NRA leadership doesn't have any particular power. It's the fact that there are 5 million NRA members and 95 million other gun owners. And when you say, gee, the NRA has too much power, we have to do something about that, what you're saying is, I don't like democracy when I'm not on the winning side. And, you know, the professor brought up the point about alcohol and Mothers Against Drunk Driving. You know, we didn't focus on banning alcohol and getting rid of beer or vodka or a certain kind. We focused on the problem, which was that intersection between drinking and driving. And you're right, we did something about it, but we did it intelligently instead of focusing on cars. We could have banned cars. We could have banned alcohol. Oh, wait, we did that once in this country.
Richard,
didn't work out so well.
Let's be real here, okay?
I am.
Statistic polling shows that even 76% of NRA members support universal background checks. So to say that the NRA supports their 5 million members and that they are listening to their positions is just not accurate. It is not supported by the data. There's a new poll out this week that shows 2 out of 3 gun owners are more likely to support a candidate that supports background checks. This is a
Well, then I guess you'll win those elections.
Well,
You know,
I
the
think
only
the tide is
poll that
beginning
really
to turn.
counts is the poll on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. That's
And
the
that's
important
like,
part.
as a lifelong Republican, I will no longer vote for and support candidates that don't support sensible gun control. And there are thousands and hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
like
Well,
me.
you know,
It's changing for every day.
The thing that Mr. Feldman seems to miss is that he wants to focus on a tiny subset of the population and to prevent gun violence that way. The problem is, especially in mass shootings, it is nearly impossible to predict rare events. Tell me where the next meteor is going to strike the Earth. You can't do it. And as a result, that approach makes no sense. The guns are important in just one way. They have nothing to do with motivation of killing somebody, that they make those who want to kill people more effective. That's all they do, is they make them more effective.
James,
And I
yes.
think-
They don't have
And I think what I would
motivation.
add to this point is that one of, I think, the perceptions that are really, is the cultural challenge that we have to actually implementing gun control is the idea that owning a gun, for instance, makes you safer. But actually, one of the things we know is that if you possess a firearm in your home, you're 2 times more likely to actually to die of a violent homicide, and you're 10 times more likely to die of suicide, to actually effectively carry out suicide. So the central issue that we hear from the NRA that they keep on stoking in quite a paranoid fashion is that the world's a very dangerous place, terrorism is coming, get a firearm. When we see this in the firearm sales after each event.
Let me show you something here that may well speak to your point, or
And by the way, that study, right, that statistic was exactly when the NRA said the CDC can no longer fund do any gun
so this
research.
is a new anti-gun control ad, and it says here in the headline on the Times, seek to rally women and LGBT voters. What does that ad look like? Have a look. Richard is smiling. I want to move the conversation along via Malika. So this idea that the LGBTQ community may well be safer with their guns, but then we also have the LGBTQ community also saying, actually, we want to actually now campaign for more regulation with guns.
It actually is picking up on a point that Jerry made a little bit earlier. Jerry, you said that you will no longer be voting for politicians who are on the opposite side of that gun control debate. There's a video, a Facebook comment we got from someone named Brian. He links these two things. He says what we need to do is start with those whose re-elections are on thin ice, and we need to bear the full weight of the LGBT community to break that ice. And so the we there he's talking about is that community. Another person tweets us in along those same lines. Callum says, queer people will succeed where others have failed. We'll change America's gun laws. So, James, why do you think that sentiment is there? What's the precedent that they're drawing
I think that
on?
we've been highly, highly effective over the last 30 years of not only changing, huge legal issues with, from the decriminalization of homosexuality to the universal availability of gay marriage in this country, but also to really changing cultural norms and values, right? In 1987, the majority of Americans thought not only that gay marriage should be illegal, but that gay sex should be illegal. Within 10 years, we got the exact opposite to occur. And that sort of idea that we actually, because our lives are political, precisely the deaths that happened in Orlando were political. Right? We've been experiencing violence and persecution our entire lives. And we know how to channel that anger into direct action that actually gets results. And our track record is excellent.
Richard, what do you make of that?
Important distinction on this issue. Gay people are on both sides of this fight. And when you're attacked, you want the most aid. You don't want an unarmed security guard showing up in a half hour. You want the SWAT team there now. And it's the same way with self-defense. You either have the ability and the right, or you don't have the right, and you won't have the ability. So this issue is all over the board with gay people because gay people are going to see themselves and have for many years as victims. One thing a gun does very effectively on a one-on-one situation, it equalizes the field. It's not about how strong you are. My 91-year-old mother is just as tough as any 6 street punks when she's armed. And she has a concealed carry license.
One,
We get back to this myth of, the good guy with the gun. And again, let's go back to the data. And when you review mass shootings between 2000 and 2013, the outcome of active shooter situations was 80% of the time the shooter committed suicide. 13% of the time they were taken down, they were tackled by unarmed bystanders, just like the Tucson shooting involving Congresswoman Giffords. 3% were held off by a citizen with a gun and 1% by an off-duty police officer. So again, let's not have a discussion based on gun marketing myths of a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. Because there was a
and
good
to
guy
that
with a gun in
point, I
Orlando,
think, Richard,
and
it's
it
very
didn't-
important to actually realize what happened in Orlando. There was an armed police officer who was trained much better than if I carried a 9mm in my pants, and he was unable to stop it. And so what I want to say to you is I'm glad that the gun lobby and the NRA is all of a sudden so concerned about gay lives. But where were you guys for 10 years, for 20 years, as the right wing stoked homophobia and violence against us? I'm sorry.
Don't accuse me of doing that.
I'm sorry. You
Don't-
worked for an
I don't-
organization that stood right by as
The
the
NRA, to my
politicians
knowledge,
you
has
supported.
never taken a position.
The politicians
on-
you supported over and over again supported discrimination and violence and hatred against our community. And we know from the data,
always-
excuse me, let me finish, that the most effective way of controlling this problem is actually getting rid of the gun violence that is endemic to this country, that plagues no other developing country in the world. Let's not accept,
agree
this is
with you
exceptional
more.
because of our rules. We choose to let it be exceptional.
Well, what is your solution here? We talked earlier about universal background checks. The shooter in Orlando not only worked for a security agency, was vetted twice by the FBI, but had a Florida concealed carry license. Obviously, he was checked, perhaps not well enough. Something went amiss, but he certainly went through multiple background checks to end up where he did. That's not the answer.
So
Or do you think it
Well,
is?
again,
So I think the answer
Thanks
is,
to the NRA.
I think the answer
Thanks.
has to be that we need to be able to get data on it. Look, when we fought the HIV epidemic, the number one thing we fought for, and literally we occupied the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, we occupied the campus of the National Institutes of Health to get better surveillance. The fact that your organization that you worked for, actually fought against surveillance of 32,000 of an epidemic that kills 32,000 people a year is outrageous, right? We
First of
have
all,
to
I
have
don't
data.
work-
You cannot formulate
So-
effective policy without understanding what's going on. And
First of all, I don't work for the National Rifle
you
Association.
did during 1983. Excuse me.
No,
So,
I didn't in
point.
1993.
Number one-
You are exactly incorrect. But I will, however, explain to you why the gun community helped defund the Centers for Disease Control, because they had an agenda. I'm all for science. Science is a good thing. And when you start off with trying to find the facts, that's the way you should go. Let the facts go where they will.
So guests, let me
But the
just bring in some
CDC
other
was
guests into
very
this conversation. Jerry, I hear you trying to get in, but I also want to bring in our online community as well so they can be part of the conversation again. Malika.
Well, Richard there had asked for solutions, asking, of course, James for solutions. There's one I will give you online. This is the price of silence. She says, nothing will happen until there's political dexterity to inspire the socio-cultural shift to subvert special interests. A lot of words there for saying we need to change hearts and minds. I want to play you a video comment from someone who explains how his community did it. And I'll direct this to you, Professor. This is Mark.
One lesson the gun control movement can learn from the marriage equality movement is one of impact. The marriage equality movement made same-sex marriage an issue that seemed to have an impact on everyone and seemed important for everyone to rally around. It was not just an issue for gay people and their families. It was an issue for all of America, for all of American society, for anyone who wants to make the country a fairer place. And by expanding the issue beyond just gay people in their communities, it made it a lot more of a mainstream battle. I think the gun control movement can and should do something similar.
So, Professor, you study attitudes, and it sounds like there he's talking about how to win people over.
Oh, no, I agree completely with him. I think the gay rights movement has done a remarkable job. And certainly, if you're opposed to assault weapons or any weapons of any kind, welcome their support. I think that is a good thing to do. I just happen to think that maybe moms demanding sense in about guns is probably a better avenue to go through. But they have been incredibly effective, and I wouldn't dismiss their effect. I think the problem, the other speaker Richard talks about the people and stuff. The truth is that the people, the congressmen and women and senators who vote against gun control do that to stay in Congress. The first goal of any elected official is to get reelected. So the lobbyists go out and they do a very good job. The NRA has done a terrific job. But we need counter lobbies to do that, to really represent the people, because most of the people do want sensible gun control. And that includes a ban on assault weapons.
Guess, let me just show you something. I was watching the ongoing coverage from Orlando all over the weekend, and this mum's Facebook comment really just jumped out at me. Anna Marquez Green on Facebook. This little girl was killed at Sandy Hook. This is what her mum wrote. She wrote a letter to the families grieving their loved ones who were killed in Orlando. She says, "I am sorry that our tragedy here in Sandy Hook wasn't enough to save your loved ones. I tried and I won't stop trying." I highly recommend you look at this Facebook comment, this letter from somebody who knows what it's like to lose somebody, and feeling that maybe she's handing over the baton, handing over some power, some influence to the gay community who might be able to do better than Sandy Hook parents. Jerry, I'm guessing that you can relate to that.
I can. I have, this is my brother. He was killed 22 years ago. So I've been in this movement a long time. And I can say that after Sandy Hook and Moms Demand Action, they do a really good job about helping to change those social norms the professor's talking about. And as horrific as the Orlando shooting is, we now understand that as a movement, we have reached another pivotal point. We now have the LGBT gay community here now, and for whatever reason, our one ray of hope is that they are now allies with us, and we recognize their expertise, their influence, and we will learn from them. We will partner with them. They will learn from us, and all the moms that have been activated since Sandy Hook. And I am more hopeful now than I have ever been in 20 years. And I welcome this. I embrace this. We were there helping to organize the vigil in Phoenix on Sunday with the LGBT community. We have cried with them. They have cried with us. And it may not happen today with the votes, but I am more hopeful than ever that we are going to hit that societal tipping point, and we are going to have change in this country that is so widely supported and desperately needed to stop the daily carnage of gun violence in this country.
Richard, I don't have much time. I've just got 30 seconds left on this part of the programme. Do you feel that NRA members, this will make a difference to the policy? This might make a difference, this one incident and this community coming on board?
No, it's not going to make any difference, because it's about the way we see the issue. It's not, again, about the gun. And, the professor was talking about banning a certain type of gun. Would everyone's pain be eased if these folks were killed with a different type of gun? That's the wrong issue. It's the fact that they were killed. Oh, you want to
Richard
just
Feldman,
joke
Professor
about it?
Richard Moran, Geraldine Hills, and James Crollinston. We are not over yet. As you can hear, the conversation continues on our show and in America. Join us at stream.aljazeera.com in the post show. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you soon. Hello, this is the Stream's exclusive online pre-show, and we are discussing gun reform in the United States. Just before I go to Malika, James, you said something just in between that main show and the pre-show. You said about the time.
It goes quick.
Yes.
It goes incredibly quick.
Right.
And you wish that you had more time to sort of address some of the points that were brought up. But
And here we have
Yeah,
more time.
indeed.
Your wish will be fulfilled.
There we go.
Malika, pick up.
Our community would agree. This is a point that was raised just a few minutes ago. The professor raised this point, and Jerry also earlier raised this point about money interests and lobbying interests and politicians and their interests. So this is a series of tweets that we got from someone. This is Igor. He actually works at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. He's a deputy director there. And what he's been doing online is highlighting some maybe little known facts and stats. Here in this tweet are the top 5 recipients of NRA funds. Senator John McCain, 7.4 million. Tom Tillis, 4.4. You can go down the list there. And then he tweets just a little bit later, oops, I got that number wrong. Senator McCain didn't take 7.4 million. He took 7.7 million. He puts the exact number there. So Jerry, when you see these numbers and you see then the way that politicians vote, what to you can be done about that? Should anything?
Well, I mean, why I vehemently disagree, I do respect the power of the NRA. I've been going up against them for 20 years, and I never underestimate them. Senator McCain right now is in a very tough re-election race. He is vulnerable, and I think his comments that he made recently, it's going to hurt him. And I think that's what's going to have to take is that some of these NRA-backed politicians are going to have to lose. And they can see that, they can ignore the people and take the money from the special interests. And eventually, if we can crack one or two and unseat them, I think that we can start changing some social norms there and cracking the power. We're already seeing cracks in the NRA and the GOP, especially with Donald Trump. And we're going to do everything we can to continue that breach.
Richard Feldman.
You know, you look at the NRA the way we look at Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg can fund a candidate and send several $1 million. It's not the NRA that sends that money. It's raised by the millions of members in $10 and $20 and $50 contributions. These represent real people out there. That
the
is
majority of the funding for the NRA
false.
comes not from the membership, but from donations directly from gun manufacturers.
If you don't know it, you should, because the Federal Election Commission, you take a look at the Federal Election Commission returns, there's no money from gun companies that go into the political victory fund of NRA. That's a fact, and I'll stand by it. And you should know better if you've been in this business 20 plus years. But so what? It's not money that votes. At the end of the day, it's people that go into those polls and pull the lever for or against a candidate. And I welcome Michael Bloomberg. Let him spend several billion of his dollars, because it won't make any difference. People are going to vote their gun rights in this country. They have, and they will continue to. What we miss in this conversation is, once again, focusing on the things we agree upon, which are many, because we're talking about our disagreements, not our agreements.
So Richard, if we do that, what would you agree on?
People a day shot are just the cost of doing business.
You may think so, I don't, and I've never met anyone in the gun business that feels that way.
No, so I am interested, Richard. What are the points that we agree on? Where is the common ground? Start the common ground. Just go.
You bet. The 3 kinds of people I think we all agree upon shouldn't have access to guns, namely violent predatory criminals, unsupervised juveniles and folks with serious mental issues going about them. And yet, all our conversation today and historically has been about the gun and separating this gun from that gun, how we're going to do this or that. We don't focus on the problem. Frankly, there's a lot more agreement on how to do the things. I'd be happy to give you multiple examples of each. I've presented them to Vice President Biden, and his staff certainly knows that. They did take me up on some of them.
So I think part of the problem is that what you didn't address is that 2/3 of gun fatalities in the United States are suicides, right? And we do not have a good we don't have a good enough mental health system in this country to basically predict every single suicide, especially considering a lot of the suicides are not done by the direct gun owner himself or herself, but actually by someone in the house. And so
then it wouldn't be a suicide.
Excuse me? If my father owns a gun and I take that gun and shoot myself, that's a suicide. It doesn't matter that I don't own the gun. The point is that I killed myself. And the problem is that
you took that action.
Yes, I did take that action. That doesn't mean that death is not still a massive problem. 20,000 deaths is a huge problem. And as a gay person, right, when you have a huge risk of queer suicides, where gay teens are at 4 times the risk of suicide that straight people are, I'm pretty outraged about that. And I want to do something to solve those 2/3 of those deaths.
If I can go back to background checks again, what he was talking about in our common ground. You know, in Missouri, they repealed in 2007 their background check bill. And when that happened, gun crime went up by 28%, homicides increased 25%. And in states that don't have strong background checks, suicide rates are 48% higher. So let's talk about what policies affect gun violence in this country and rates of gun violence and suicides, and it is background checks.
And let's also talk about the fact that there is just a study published this April that showed that an analysis of 130 different studies analyzing the gun policies of 30 different countries, that there is significant correlation across the board with restricting access to firearms and reduce both crime and suicide, both homicides and suicides.
All right, Gesta, I want to take just get a final point from you, a sentence, if you can, encapsulate your thought into this. I hear in the conversation we're having, we are going into a classic gun debate, the classic gun debate. Richard even knows all the points where he feels you have in common. He feels like this is where we should be taking the conversation. Jerry, you come to it with a perspective. James, you do as well. I see no point where you're all coming together at all, even though, Richard, you say there is some. That's your classic gun debate. I'm used to that. What I'm not used to is hearing the gay community saying, now this is our challenge as well. So bearing that in mind, what difference will this make? Professor, in a nutshell, wrap us up.
Well, I think that the gay community, if they're able to transfer this success over to gun control, I think it'll make a big difference. But on the suicide thing, I wanted to say,
Professor, we're doing closing remarks now, so I'm gonna wrap it up and we'll follow up with you as we continue the conversation online. Jerry, what difference will it make? The gay community saying we want gun control, we are going to be activists in this fight. What's the difference?
Powerful and passionate new advocates and allies in this fight.
James.
Yeah, I think that we've fought our entire lives for changing society's norms and changing the laws surrounding it. I think that we have the infrastructure and the know-how to really significantly actually make some progress on this issue that for so long has eluded any sort of progress. And that I think I'm very hopeful about.
Confessions of a Gun Lobbyist. I have to read your book, Richard. I think it will tell me so much about the NRA and where we are with guns in the United States. Until then, your final thoughts on this particular conversation about the LGBTQ community saying, we want to change.
Well, I think we're going to hear a lot more over the next 6 months from the Pink Pistols. And in my calls over the last few days, I know they've been swamped with interest from the gay community in learning about firearms and obtaining guns to protect themselves. That's the norm in America. When people are threatened, they don't look to the government to protect them. They look to do it themselves.
And the Pink Pistols are members of the LGBTQ community who are gun-carrying members, and they're doing that because they feel that they're safer by carrying guns. Malika.
Or at least gun owners.
Or gun owners, okay.
We'll give the last word to someone online. This is Ayaka, and she says, for how long are we going to keep debating on gun violence while people are dying every day from this epidemic? So to end on that note, I wanted to show this tribute that one of the largest civil rights organizations in the country's HRC Human Rights Campaign posted on their building here in Washington, D.C., just down the street, pictures of the 49 people killed. I'll scroll through just a bit of them, and you can see the tributes kind of rolling in there and people going to visit the building of those 49.
Thank you, guests, for being part of this conversation. It will continue online and in America. Take care, everybody.